There was a damaging blow delivered by Telstra shareholders today, though, as we've been reporting. Those investors voting against executive pay report, a very stiff protest, one of the biggest that we've seen for an Australian-listed company. Meantime, and this is part of the problem, really, Aussies are generally got very weak wages growth, and we've got rising costs of living. At the moment, we seem to be looking on the bright side, though. That's what we learned from some figures today. Exactly, and we're going to be pulling apart some of these issues for our Taking Stock panel tonight. And we're lucky we're joined by Lucy Foster, CEO of financial services provider Generation Life, and cost of living editor for News Corp, John Rolfe. Thank you both for being with us in here. It's all been about executive pay, and Telstra copying a bit of a wallop. 62% of shareholders voted against, and the chairman said, we're just going to have to get used to this. What do you think, Lucy?
Look, I do echo the sentiment that in Australia some CEOs are excessively paid, and the top CEOs in this country earn north of $4 million a year, which is nearly 80 times what the average Australian earns. So there is something wrong with that number. Look, I do agree executives have to be appropriately incentivised, but, you know, so do staff who take customer calls, so do staff who make the product, so do staff who deliver the product to the customer. From my perspective, I like the idea of a fixed yearly salary and a long-term incentive scheme over a 3 to 5 year period. That's how I'm remunerated. My remuneration is publicly available, and I can assure you it's not out of step with the average Australian.
Well, I don't want to be a contrarian just for the point of it, but I totally disagree. And I think the only reason we're having this discussion is because Telstra's performance is so poor. As I think one of the proxy shareholder advisory services has said in the lead up to today's vote, what would it take for Telstra's board to give a zero variable reward to its CEO? How bad does the performance need to be? 40%, that's how much Telstra shares fell in 2017-18. It's not good enough. I don't think that it's the chairman tried to say today that, oh, you know, maybe we should go back 20 years and have, oh, it's 50% fixed and the other is shares. If that's what we want to go back to, then all companies need to do it. Look, I think that there is something in between, but I think if shareholders feel the pain, the CEO should more so than has happened at Telstra. And the easy fix here, of course, is to get the Telstra share price going north, and then the chairman and the CEO wouldn't be getting these awkward questions.
And he did say, it does suggest the system gone wrong. He was saying, look, we spend so much time on this issue. We don't sit around scheming, which, you know, it's perhaps the biggest issue that they talk about and spend time on. And yet, obviously, they've just got it completely wrong in terms of what the community expected. The problem is the thing that they all have over us in the end is this idea that if you want to pay peanuts, you get monkeys. And that still rings true for me. You can't just offer measly salaries if you want the best people from a global talent pool. And that just keeps me coming back to, well, I don't want them to pay crappy pay to these guys either.
Exactly. I mean, if we were offering, let's say, I don't know, $300,000. I mean, that seems to work in politics. I mean, the Prime
Plus
Minister...
the cars and all the expenses and the helicopters that are flying.
But politicians don't appear to be in it for the money. Business people, it does seem to be a different marketplace. And I think that you do need to offer very lucrative amounts in order to attract the best talent. Mind you, I think one of the charts that was prepared today showed that Sol Trujillo was better paid than David Thodey, the two predecessors to the current CEO, and Thodey clearly did so much better than Sol, who really was just stirring the pot as far as I was concerned. So I don't think that there's been much correlation there. Thodey was outstanding. He got paid far more than Penn. Penn needs to lift his game, and the board need to be able to be answerable for his performance.
Was the top 10 companies here? I mean, it's kind of hard to get bigger in Australia than that. What is worth a couple of $1 million a year? Maybe best footy player in the country or something like that?
Well, exactly. We're happy to pay sports people millions of dollars, but not our CEOs.
Look, I think what is worth it is when the remuneration is tied to genuine customer outcomes. And by that, I mean it's fair value, you're given good service, you're given a product that performs. Obviously, you've got to be incentivised, and that has to align with business growth. I think now, more than ever, particularly in financial services, you have to do the right thing. And I think what we've seen through the Royal Commission is that just because something's legal doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do.
Well, so, but, I mean, is that the kind of the catalyst for change here? Because the chairman said that this needs to be adopted broadly and it's going to take time. I mean, a fat chance, or is this kind of Royal Commission and what's happening in Australia at the moment the trigger that could see actual change? What do you think, John?
Well, I do think it could be the change. I think that certainly the banks make up such a big proportion of our ASX top 20, 50. If they were to completely overhaul what they were doing, I would think it would be difficult for other companies, the other large companies, not to follow suit. So I think that if they were genuine and really tried to come up with a form of remuneration and reward that was linked to the types of things that you're talking about, these outcomes that are good for the customer and their other stakeholders, I think that would lead to the type of sea change that perhaps is needed.
Guys, we mentioned earlier this KPMG report that came out today that showed by roughly the 4th day of working there are far too many, tens of thousands of women who basically pay to go to work, or pay, they earn $2.50 if they're lucky, and they probably go backwards if they're the unluckier ones. I wasn't that surprised to see that, because that puts figures today on stuff that I hear all the time from friends and acquaintances and people around our workplace. What did you guys think of seeing that report today?
Yeah, look, I've got personal experience of that. The first 3 years after my first daughter was born, all my take-home pay went to childcare.
Yep.
And look, that was a decision I made with my husband. It was a family decision, and I suppose that's the first issue I have with this, in that it's being framed as a women's issue. It's a women's issue, it's a men's issue, it's a family issue, it's a society's issue. I think we can all agree.
Business issue.
It's a business issue, absolutely. We need to do more to support women re-entering the workforce and to support men and women who choose to work flexibly. Look, myself, I'm lucky. I work in quite an unusual flexible working construct in that I job share a CEO role. My partner Catherine and I, we're the first CEOs in Australia to job share a CEO role in a financial services organisation. So what that means is I work half the week, Catherine works half the week. I get to spend some time with my little people and do a job that I love. However, were I to choose to work full-time, I would need to seriously consider the implications from a tax perspective, because one of those 2 additional days is going straight to the taxman. So I can really empathise with the decision-making process men and women are going through today. Is it actually worth the extra hours and the time away from my family?
Would your husband consider working 4 days if it meant that it worked out better from an overall tax perspective for your family? I certainly think
100%.
Yes, because I think this is a family issue. This is not an issue for women and women only. This is a family issue, and as a parent to 2 young children, I made a very much considered change to the way I worked and the type of work that I did when we started a family, and it's meant that I'm able to carry my fair share, 50% of the workload. And that means that my wife is able to pursue a career in the way that she should be able to, exactly as I can. And I think that more men need to look at doing that. This is more of a men's issue than it is a women's issue, I would argue, because not enough men look at this as their responsibility as part of their relationship with their partner. It's not good enough to see it as, well, if a woman goes from working 3 days to 4, she only makes $2.50 an hour or less, depending on the incomes. Well, why don't some of the guys think about taking a day off work? Because I'm sure it's more tax effective to have 2 people doing 4 and 4, or have 4 and 3, than it is to have 5 and 3. So, guys, it's time to, put our money where our mouth is, and, really we could show.
But one of the points is, if both parents did have a job, they both really did want to work full-time. And I do believe sometimes as parents you actually realise you don't want to spend 5 days away from your kids, whether you're the mother or the father. But if you did both want to work 5 days a week, the whole system completely disincentivises that and says, actually don't do that. That is not an option, because to pay money to go to work, that is no one's option. I don't think. I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? The system works against people who do want to work more. And we talk about, bringing the best talent into the workplace. Well, they're all sitting on the sidelines because there's no reason to be in the workplace if you're on that 4th or 5th day, whether you're the father or the mother, as you said.
Brooke, and that's such a big deal, because not only is this an issue for household budgets, but it's also a massive issue for Australian productivity in general, if there's this disincentive to get back into the workforce. So I kind of wonder, is it time to get businesses more proactive in the childcare area? I mean, we see a lot of massive companies in Australia, kind of subsidise a few things, maybe a gym, maybe a cafe, whatever. Is there any space to kind of get this more happening in building and getting people back to work that way?
Yeah, 100%. Look, we all know that that's what works in the Scandinavian countries. You know, childcare is pretty much free. It's accessible. You don't have to put your child on a waiting list.
Especially for the fathers, it's particularly accessible.
Well, my brother and sister-in-law are visiting from Sweden at the moment.
Oh, they've got it.
They are paying $15 a month in childcare. They have a combined 18 months to use where they will be paid at up to 90% of their pay. Look, whether or not Australia can afford a welfare system at that level, I don't know, but we need to think about it. If we want people to have the opportunity of careers, whether they're a man or a woman, they've made it work. And they have some of the highest living standards in the world, and they have some of the most successful companies. So if they've made it work, why can't we?
Yeah.
Guys, can we talk about brands of the past? Because yesterday we were talking about Sears going bust, and there's been lots of people going down memory lane and in the United States about this company they used to go to, the good old days. And we've been talking today about the 45 years of publication in Australia for Cosmo magazine. So that's obviously a pretty big moment for the media to watch that, that famous title suffer from digital media. And so that goes by the wayside. That's a sad story in itself, but it did make us think about some of the favourite brands and things we used to love that didn't quite stand the test of time. Anything that comes to mind, John Rolfe?
Well, it's not so much a brand, but it's something that society has decided we can't just do anymore, at least not in the States, and that's bonfire night. And firecrackers. You know, I'm thinking that I might need to take a holiday to the Northern Territory.
Yeah, they do it well up
just
there.
so I can get light up a cartwheel. I get it. There were good reasons for it, and I've got the scars on my feet to show what can go wrong from a bad bonfire night experience. But I miss it. It was a great childhood memory. I enjoyed building the bonfire. I grew up in the country. We would gather the stuff and build it out in our paddock, and it's something that I wish my children would have the experience of bonfire night, and they probably won't.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I mean, as a working mum, I miss long lies and lunch breaks.
Yes.
I'm pretty old-fashioned. I do like a good paper magazine. It takes me 6 months to read it because I had no time. But I was reflecting. One of the things I miss is, when you used to come home from your family holiday and you'd go to the photo shop and you'd wait in anticipation for the films to get developed. You couldn't remember the shots that you'd taken, how good or bad that you looked. The other thing that I miss is...
And then getting the whole film back and realising everyone had red dots in their eyes. Oh, no, the whole film.
You get about 10% of the photos that you can use.
Kodak definitely did not last the test of time. I think it's in a tiny fraction of what it used to be.
Isn't it just?
Every shopping centre had the Photoshop though, didn't they?
That's right, that's right. And I also miss the old cassette tapes. I used to sit and listen to the radio live and record songs and make up cassette tapes for my friends, and you don't do that anymore.
And yell, "It's on!" to your sister up the hallway. It's on! Did you press play?
Take 40.
Yeah, take 40. Actually, it reminded me today as well of the Saturday nights of, it's an obvious one, but the Blockbuster rental store. I'm running up the bill that was more than you could afford, and then trying to guess your best friend's family's password, so you could still keep hiring.
I'm going to get back by 6 p.m. It's going to be late charges. Watch it again.
Yeah, walking out with a huge stack of weeklies.
Yes, exactly. They're much cheaper. I do remember one glorious time where I did have too much of a bill, and I thought, I wonder what Jill's family's password would be. I'm sure it'd be the dog. Said it, it was the dog. Got the stuff, told her later. Just, little things like that. Kids today don't get that fun stuff.
Well, there's still lots of passwords we can guess, so I encourage all viewers to make sure that their passwords are not their dogs.
Very true.
Thank you for that good tip. I'll just go and do a few things when I get off air. I still do use my dog a couple of times, just on the basic stuff. The other thing we talked about today is consumers remaining, quite positive actually. We talk about high petrol prices, the housing market, the whole bank story, everyone's so upset about it. And yet there was a consumer confidence survey today showing we're pretty much in bright spirits at the moment. This is from ANZ, one we watch quite often. John, you look at kind of the cost of living side of things in your job. What are you finding consumers are thinking about at the moment?
Yeah, look,
focusing on.
I admire their resilience, because I do think that there are some storm clouds which could have seen these numbers go in a different direction when you look globally. I think that petrol it's something that really is in the fore of people's minds because it's a bill you pay every week, and you fill up the car and you know that it was $5 more, or you're recognising that it was, compared to last year, $15 more. So it's a sizable bill, in fact the biggest weekly bill that people have. And if you talk to someone like ACCC Chairman Rod Sims, he would say that when you combine everything else that he gets asked about and then compare that to what he gets asked about with petrol, he gets asked more about than everything else put together.
Wow.
Yeah, it's that top of mind for consumers. So they're very sensitive to it. I think that it reaches a threshold.
And 4.5-year highs at the moment,
That's
right now?
I think it reaches a threshold level, and it's probably around like this sort of 165, 170 level. The good news here is it appears that petrol won't go that much higher. We're sort of seeing demand and supply in a sort of an equilibrium, and unless the Australian dollar continues to fall because of rising US interest rates, it looks like we won't see much more pain at the bowser. But I think we are very close to a level where the average Australian consumer will get very angry about petrol prices, and when they get angry, they don't particularly care who they get angry at. They don't have a chairman or a CEO. They just want it fixed. And unfortunately, petrol prices are governed by free markets, and people can charge whatever they want.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's kind of one of the key reasons to keep an eye out on the Aussie dollar, which a lot of us kind of forget to do unless we're about to go on holiday or buy something overseas online. But yeah, the Aussie dollar, it's a big one there when it comes to petrol.
Absolutely it is. It's probably the second biggest factor after the actual cost of the oil itself. And we've had OPEC now and some of the other countries like Russia reducing supply, which has been pushing up prices. And now we've got this falling Australian dollar, which is adding to it even further. But yeah, the prospects are that we won't see much more of an increase in the barrel cost, and so hopefully if the dollar can hold about where it is, although we are likely to see more US interest rate increases, then we won't be paying too much more when we fill up. Or otherwise we're going to have to get Teslas and not pay for any petrol.
Lucy, from your neck of the woods, what do you sense as the sentiment?
Look, we're a savings company at Generation Life, so our customers are naturally forward-looking. And look, what they're telling us is that, over the medium term, they are worried. We know that grandparents and parents are worried about funding the next generation's education. Whether it's private or public, even going to public school nowadays is expensive. And how are you ever going to afford your first house? I mean, it used to be the case that, you went to school, you got a job, and you'd be okay. But things are really different now. We know that, half of private school fees in Australia are funded by grandparents. And we know a lot of parents who are now saving monthly, putting money away to help their kids buy their first house. So whilst I do agree that on a day-to-day basis, consumer sentiment is buoyant, I think that over the medium term, Australians are worried.
Great to have you guys. Lucy Foster, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
And John Rolfe, fantastic. Thanks for joining us, for taking stock.